Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are actress Dearblah Molloy and filmmaker Peter J. Brown. Award-winning actress Dearblah Molloy was born and raised in Dublin, where she attended Mayfield College. She's an associate artist at the Abbey Theatre, and she's played the stages on Broadway, the West End, and Los Angeles, and a list of films that we can't go into are on her credit, along with TV performances. Dearblah, say your name for me.
It's Dearbhla.
It is. I said it right.
You were perfect. And you'd be glad to know that that's a short form of a much longer name.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so we'll stick with Dearbhla.
Yeah, now we can hear your accent, right? You were in a lot of films. I loved Damned United.
Did you?
Oh, yes. Wasn't it great?
It was absolutely gorgeous, but the terrible thing about it is that my bit was cut out of it. So, although it's on my credits, because it's in the, if you buy the DVD, it's in the shots that were taken out. What happened was, my character appears at the very beginning, and she was the secretary to the previous man who had run
who ran the
whole
the soccer team.
The soccer team.
Because
yes.
I didn't know what that was.
Well, that's what it was. But because the new manager comes in, Michael comes in, and he fires me, they decided that in the placing of the film it made him too unsympathetic at the beginning, so they took it out. But there's a lovely piece in the DVD extras where the director explains the agony of that decision, and I was terribly disappointed because I loved it. I loved the writing.
And also, we didn't know that it was soccer and that big competition. No. Well, Americans don't know too much about that, and it was such a wonderful thing that took place during those years, right?
That's right.
Did you always want to be an actress?
No, I always wanted to be a journalist. I probably always wanted to do what you do, which
a journalist?
Is why I'm so envious of you.
Oh, but I could never act.
Well, I just fell into it, and I finished school when I was very young. When I was 16, I finished my formal schooling, and there was nothing more I could do, and you had to be 18 to go to university. So my mother sent me to evening classes as well as secretarial college, and one of the evening classes was drama, and I fell in love with it, and so
you started then in Dublin?
Yes, I started with the Abbey.
You did start at the Abbey?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. What is an associate actress there?
You know, I'm not sure really what it means, because since I've been made an associate, I've never done anything with them. It was about 4 years ago. But I think it's a sort of honorary title, really, and I suppose it means length of association with them over the years. And it implies, although it's never happened yet, that they can use you for advice, or they can ask you to do a production, and you'll be a kind of, it's almost like an executive producer part of it, I suppose.
Because the Abbey is one of the most well-known theatres in Ireland, right?
It's the first national theatre in the world.
Oh, it is?
Yes, it was the first theatre to be nationalised ever.
When you went on stage, and when you are on stage, because you're on stage right now at the Kirk Douglas and the Cripple of Inishmore, when you go on stage, do you have some secret weapon that you use that makes you act better, or?
I don't know. It's not conscious like that, but there is the difference between being on stage and on film is the relationship with the audience, of course.
Of course.
And that's the other dimension, and that's the bit that changes every night. So if you came to see the same play 6 times, it would be subtly different each time because of the character of the audience. And audiences have characters. I don't understand how they do.
And do you feel it? Do you feel it?
Yes, you do.
And what happens? You react differently?
You do, and very subtly. For example, in a comedy, which is what we're doing at the moment, you get there are consistent, generally speaking, there are consistent laughs all through the night. But they'll be
and you hear those, right?
You're waiting to a greater or lesser intensity. But there are others which happen sometimes and don't happen other times. And I would love somebody to do a study on how the character of an audience evolves, because they are And it's not necessarily the sum of their parts. It's not like you've got one very strong person in the audience and everybody else acquires their characteristics. Somehow they evolve into a recognizable character, and that's what you relate with on stage.
That's really interesting, because I know actors always say that they're relating to the audience, and yet how do they relate? If they cough, does that bother you? If they're whispering to each other, does that bother you?
The only thing that really bothers us is phones going off.
I was going to say.
As you could imagine, yes.
Because you never had to deal with that until the last few years.
No, now it's pretty pervasive. Coughs, sometimes you get a persistent cougher, and usually if the cough is, I mean, normally you just let it go, but if the cough is really loud, sometimes you might have to repeat a word or repeat the beginning of a sentence because you know that the audience haven't caught it. And sometimes it doesn't matter, but sometimes it's key to the plot or key to a running gag or something like that. So you've got to repeat.
That's very interesting. Martin McDonagh, who is a phenomenon, right? Great writer. Is he Irish?
He's Irish by birth, by birthright, in the sense that both his parents are Irish, and both his parents come from the west of Ireland, and his parents come from the Gaeltacht, which is the Irish-speaking part. And in the Irish-speaking parts, the English that Martin uses is a kind of version of the same kind of English that Synge used. It sounds very lyric and quite different to the way English is used here or in England.
Well, when you take a role like that, do you have to have coaching? I mean,
no,
because you know how to. You've heard that accent enough.
You know, we're going to be doing this play on Inishmaan, which is where it's set, which is one of the 3 Aran Islands, and my accent is a complete invention. It's not an Inishmaan accent. I think because I've been with this play since it first started at the National in London.
I was going to say, you started the National, you went to the Atlantic Theatre in New York City, and then you're in LA, of course, now at the Kirk Douglas.
And they're different productions. The National was obviously the British National Theatre, and then these last 2 productions are Druid productions from Galway. But the cast that we've got here in LA only has 2 members of the cast that were in the Atlantic in New York, and I'm one of them, and one of the other boys is another.
Do they need coaching? Do they have to find their accents?
I think what happened is that because some of us had played it before, we set an accent, so everybody just kind of copied along.
Is that what happened? Well, tell me the story. You said it was you said it was a comedy. But there's some dark, it's very dark too.
It's a black comedy. It's a black comedy. It challenges you to laugh at what you've just heard.
Yes.
I mean, if you think of the title, The Cripple of Inishmaan, we don't call people cripples now. It's kind of not PC at all.
Right.
So it's full of things like that. I'm not going to tell you the whole story because that would give away the end of the play. But suffice to say that it's the central character is this young boy who has some kind of physical deformities, if you like, who was abandoned perhaps at birth and has been adopted by 2 very eccentric aunties, of which I'm one.
You're one of the aunties, right? I know. Well, I think I saw it at the Donmar Theatre. I saw one of his plays, McDonagh's plays.
I don't know which one. You probably saw, I don't know what
years
was at the
ago.
Donmar, but you might have seen, if it was in London, you might have seen any of the Leenane trilogy.
The Leenane, yeah.
Or you
the
might,
Beauty Queen of
Leenane.
Beauty
Queen of Leenane, yes, which is a wonderful
And
play.
that also played in New York.
It did, and it won Tony. It won a Tony. Gary Hines won the first Tony director for a woman that there ever was.
Well, talking about directors, when you play, say, at the Atlantic or the National or even here, do the directors make a difference?
They do, and they do particularly, for example, in this cast, where 2 of us had played it before and the director had directed it before, when the new people came in, she, in a way, has to be a bit like a therapist, really. Although she knows the answers because she's done it before, she can't impose those on the new people. The new people have to find their own way.
But you already know your role, right?
Yes.
So what happens with that? Does she
kind of left me alone?
So it's always like new people coming to interact?
Yes, but if I had started with her, then of course it would have been it would have been a collaborative effort between both of us, I guess. Yeah.
When I first saw you, it was at the Jack Rutberg Gallery,
Yes.
and of course Jack Rutberg has a fantastic he's been 30 years on La Brea.
It is so beautiful.
And he represents an Irishman, Patrick Graham,
yes.
and who's a fantastic
wonderful painter.
But you did this, you and Dermot Crowley performed Give Me Your Hand, is that what it's called?
Yes.
And it's an evening of poetry. It's so different. It's called an evening.
Yeah, no, it's not strict. I think if somebody said to me there's an evening of poetry, I'd go, oh, I don't know, it'd be a bit boring, wouldn't it? But in fact, what it is Paul Durcan wrote a series of poems to paintings in the National Gallery in London and produced a book which had the paintings on one side and the poems on the other side.
And he wrote the poems.
He wrote the poems. What we do is we take some of these paintings and we project them onto a screen, and then we do the poems either side. But the poems are they're kind of contrapuntal to the paintings, almost. They're Paul Durcan's almost interpretations of the paintings, but he takes the painting as the basis of something, and then he skites off in his imagination to places you couldn't possibly imagine. And a lot of and they're like little playlists, really, which is why.
Do you interact?
Yes, we do.
He reads, you read,
and they're always in character. So there are very few that are just. There are none, in fact, that are straight. They're all in the voice of somebody or other, which is great for us because it gives us license to be lots of different people.
I see. Have you done it on stage?
Yes, we've done it at the Shakespeare Theatre in Chicago on stage.
And how does that evening unfold on stage as compared to this? Was a different kind of
because
situation.
It was so close.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's true. It was
we were very close to everybody, so we had to take it down a little. I don't know that I have a preference for stage or whatever arena, I suppose you could call the way in which we did it. The thing about it is you couldn't take it onto a big stage because the audience, you need to be able to see the paintings quite clearly, because quite often he's referring to some tiny detail in the painting that you couldn't see if you were sitting far back. So really it can only be done to about 200 people at the maximum.
Oh, so at Jack Rutberg's gallery was just perfect.
It was perfect, yes, it was lovely.
And it was sponsored by the U.S.-Ireland Alliance,
yes.
which seems to have a very big presence here. They do something before the Academy Awards on honoring.
What the U.S.-Ireland Alliance is run by Trina Vargo, she was a foreign policy advisor to Ted Kennedy, Senator Ted Kennedy. And so she was very much a sort of backstage part of the peace process in Ireland. And post-peace process, they set up, she and Senator George Mitchell set up the George Mitchell Scholarship Program, which was obviously to allow people to do postgraduate studies in Ireland. And what the kind of ethos of the U.S.-Ireland Alliance is that, or the central tenet is that the relationship, the Irish-American relationship, the relationship between Ireland and America is now outdated. It was based on, a time when Ireland was economically deprived and when it had a lot of problems with the North. Now both those things, well, we're now back to that, but it did solve itself. We then had the Celtic Tiger and came the peace process. So she believes that the relationship needed to be readjusted in relation to contemporary reality. And what she believes is that its future generations of likely leaders of America need to have a better relationship with the Ireland of now. So that's what the U.S.-Ireland Alliance does. It fosters those relationships, and the scholarship program funds them to go and do studies. And the people that are on these programs are wonderful. We met some of them in Boston and Washington, and you just think, talking to these young people, 26, 27, that if these are the future leaders of America, we're fine.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear that.
Sensational human beings.
This is a big thing that she's taken on,
a really big thing. Yeah. And so that evening that you came to had people that she invited whom she wanted to make more aware of the U.S.-Ireland Alliance, and obviously for Jack.
And that's why you knew so many people too.
Yes, I knew the actors and people from the business.
Thank you so much for coming.
Joan, it's been a pleasure and a great privilege, I want to say, to be interviewed by you. You're a legend.
Oh, thank you so much. You've embarrassed me. Don't go away. We'll be right back with filmmaker Peter J. Brown. Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with filmmaker Peter J. Brown, who was born and raised on Cape Cod in Hyannis, Massachusetts. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts from Bowdoin University and studied abroad at Salzburg and in London. He's been called a pirate and an eco-terrorist because of his work with the Sea Shepherd Centurion Society. What is that?
Sea Shepherd Conservation Society.
Oh, that's better than the way that I'm saying, right?
Well, they're kind of centurions, too.
I think Centurion is kind of good, isn't it? I think I'm going along with the pirate stuff. You'll probably be recognized from the Discovery Channel Whale Wars, I think.
Right, I was on the first 2 seasons of Whale Wars.
Okay, so that was a big hit show. And Peter is all about being an environmentalist and a conservationist, right?
Right, I'm all about being a conservationist.
Okay. Is that the same? Environmentalist, conservationist?
Well, you know, people in the environmental movement, quote unquote, there's all kinds of animal rights people. You know, there are people that only eat things that fall off trees. You know, there are vegans, there are vegetarians, there are...
But you're not like that.
No, I'm a conservationist.
Because I think of one of the things you said, well, if there's an elephant there, I'll eat it. That wasn't so good, was it?
No, I have said yeah. Well, I don't know about that. But yeah, I have eaten a lot of strange and exotic meats over my years.
You have?
Well, I travel. My job is in television, and I do a lot of films like Discovery around the world.
But prior to that, here you were producing Real People and Entertainment Tonight. That doesn't seem to
Well, that
jive.
was my job. You know, that's how I made money. I was in television, and I was a field producer on Real People for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, you were? So you really knew the business from
Well,
then.
Actually, George Slaughter taught me the business. Good old George.
I love George
Yeah.
Slaughter.
And, well, I saw him the other day, and he laughed. He said, you know, Whale Wars gets 2 million viewers. And he laughed. He said, you know, if you brought in a show, Peter, less than 40 million viewers, I would have fired you.
Oh, he's so great.
Yeah,
he
he's
lives
great,
right. He lived across the street from my mom.
Well, I learned I learned my storytelling from George, and, you know, so I worked there a long time, and I was a field producer on Entertainment Tonight.
Okay, so here you were. You're from Cape Cod, so I know there's seawater in your veins.
Right.
And I guess that's how you got to the sea. What is it called? Sea Shepherd.
Well, actually, George Slaughter got me.
Was it the water in your veins?
Well, I stayed for 30 years because of the water in my veins, but George Slaughter originally hired me to do a film on Paul Watson during the Real People days.
Oh, tell us about that.
And so I said, okay, and I did films on all kinds of people. George sent me all over the world, actually. And so I went to meet Paul, and it got kind of mixed up, and he was asked to go to Japan.
What was Paul doing at the time?
At the time, what he said he was going to do, he was going to ram a Japanese whaling boat if they didn't stop whaling.
Oh, so he was already active.
This is like 1982.
He was pretty.
Well, he'd just
active.
come back from the Soviet Union where they had that confrontation with the Soviet Navy over whaling. So he had just got back. That's where he became famous to TV type people.
I see.
And so when he got back, George Slaughter knew about him and said you should do a story, and I went and did, and Paul and I became friends. And over the years, whenever I could, I would help him out.
Oh, so you would just go on the boat with him?
Well, I would go on the boat and film it.
Not just, but you would go on the boat.
Well, yeah, I actually, over the years, ended up, you know, first mate, and, you know, I can run the boats, and working as a seaman for Paul. But in the beginning, I would film the campaigns, and then when we would come back, I would give the film away. Back then, it was still film. To news people so they could run it, and then stories over the years, and then I'd go back to my little job at, filming ladies that eat frogs or something.
Was George producing it?
George was actually ultimately producing a story on Paul Watson for Real People.
Oh,
Or
I see.
I was actually doing it for George
I
on
see,
Paul
I
Watson
see,
for Real People.
Okay, so then you got this.
Well, I kind of got a bug, you know. I liked the guy. We got on fine, and I liked what he was doing.
Were you into science?
Well, you know, I play one on TV, a scientist, but I'm not really a scientist. No, I'm more into adventure, but or I'm into animals. You know, I'm a conservationist. I believe we should leave wilderness, and I saw a niche that Paul needed. He had to. What he was doing, in my opinion, was very important, and I had a way of helping him promote what he was doing on television.
And that's almost at the point where you said you were on the Sea Shepherd so much, you became a pirate.
Well, well, over the years, I became a board of directors, and then I was their
Pirates a board of directors.
Well,
Tell us what.
Well,
why.
the pirate thing came from people used to call us pirates, and
Because you were on the sea.
Well, yeah, because they thought we were doing things. You know, Sea Shepherd has a very good reputation. Paul Watson is speaking Saturday in downtown Los Angeles at the convention, so he's out of jail. I walk around totally free, so we're not so bad. And
no,
just
I think
because
you're
people call you names doesn't necessarily mean you are that person. I mean, my film is called Confessions of an Eco-Terrorist. Well, everybody's all upset.
Well, yeah, tell us about it while we're talking about it, because I was going to ask you what an eco-terrorist is.
Well, eco-terrorists are the people that are out there killing the planet, killing the whales, killing the seals, killing the dolphins. We're, in fact, conservationists, so we're the ultimate conservatives.
So you're the opposite of a bad pirate. You're a good pirate, getting rid of those people.
Yeah, I suppose the bad pirates who are into money, if you think money is good, are good. But I'm not into money. I'm into the earth and having animals around. You know, I'm into sustainability, and I've helped over the years. And Watson gets this thing thrown at him a lot, and my movie kind of makes fun of it.
Well, tell us about your movie, because I love this poster where it says "Ram, Ram, sunk, sunk, ram." Tell us what those are.
Well, those we used to put the kill flags on the side of the old Sea Shepherd boats on the number of ships they ram or sank. Or
that was a kill flag? Is that
that
what
was
it's called?
Well, in the old war days, World War II, they put the Japanese kill flags on the side of their World War II fighter planes or their bombers or whatever. Well, this was our way of saying, we're serious, we've done this, and, get out the way.
Well, this film is...
Well, my film actually is my story.
documentary.
It's my story of my 30 years working with the likes of Paul Watson and Robert Hunter, who was the original founder of Greenpeace, who has now since passed away.
So how did you get into this project, other than just working with the Sea Shepherd? Why did you decide to make the film?
Well, I've never made a film on the environmental movement because, people don't make money making these films. And I had 2 kids, and my daughter went to Berkeley, and, my son went to NYU. So I had to make a living, and I wasn't going to make a living doing this, and this is what I did as my hobby. So I would come back and make a living being a normal TV whore.
I see, okay, all right. So in the beginning, you wanted to make people aware of the problems.
Well,
Does
in the
that
beginning,
address it?
Oh, this actually addresses it. It addresses how we went about it. It addresses how Paul Watson and others used a very small group of people with very little money to really run a revolution. I mean, 30 years ago when we started, no one even cared about green. Nowadays, even corporations want to be green.
So how does it get funded?
Paul?
All of it, yeah.
Well, I'm no longer involved with the Sea Shepherd. I mean, I'll see Paul tomorrow. We're friends, and I went on a Sea Shepherd boat for whale wars.
Now we're talking about your book.
Oh, my movie came from private funds. I had the footage.
I see.
I said someday when I retire, I'm going to make a movie. I happened to get my thumb pretty well smashed up in Antarctica, which was on whale wars, and so I was out of commission for a year.
I see.
I carry a camera around to, shoot big sexy animals that can eat you. So when you have your thumb out of commission, it's broken in 6 places, you can't do my job. So I did this.
So that's what it was. You kind of changed your skill set.
Well, no, I'm a filmmaker and I'm a storyteller.
You're a storyteller.
And a friend of mine, Tim Huntley, who is a very fine editor. He was a writer-editor. He came out. Actually, we went to Massachusetts to my house on Cape Cod, and we got together and we sat down for about 8 months and we edited the film.
One of the things is you said you take this attitude that you can't blame the people for doing it because they have their reasons or people make them do it.
Well, I don't know if that's I basically say what's different in my film than a lot of other environmental films is it doesn't necessarily come from anger.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily angry at these people.
That's what I was talking about, that attitude.
Yeah, and it's a different attitude.
Right.
And I come from Cape Cod, and I grew up with a lot of old fishermen or people who had been fishing for years. And many of the people I meet in the seal hunt are like the people I grew up with. Many of the people I meet in the Faroe Islands are like the people I grew up with.
So you have a camaraderie or
well,
a
I just understand that
relationship.
if I could just get them to see what they were doing was kind of stupid.
Oh.
You can't eat the whales. You can't do anything with the
Right.
seals. You know, maybe it's time to quit.
Do they get it?
They don't really. Well, I think a lot of these, another issue in my film is a lot of these issues have come to a point that both sides have their back up so hard that it's hard for them to find a new ground. And I think there is, what I tell universities when I speak to them, and because of my film, is I think there is now room for people to think of things differently, not bitch and moan so much, and get out there and try to solve problems positively. Not saying, okay, that guy's an idiot, I'm not going to work with him. Saying, okay, yeah, maybe I could find some common ground. Let's figure out how you can not kill seals. You don't do anything with them. It's kind of stupid.
So mediation.
Well, not necessarily mediation. I certainly want them, I mean, education is ultimately the way anything gets won over. And we as a humans are kind of, a greedy, sufficient or self-loving species. So until it affects us, we don't really want to change anything. But I do think that it's better to try to solve problems than it is to just bitch about them.
I think so
It's at a
too.
point now that the population is such that we have to do something because we're losing just tremendous amounts of species.
Well, I thank you so much for coming and telling us and for having the confessions of an eco-terrorist speak to us. Thanks, Paul.
Peter.
Peter Paul.
Paul Watson is in the movie.
Okay.
He's the kind of heavy guy.
Okay.
I'm the little quirky little guy in the back taking pictures.
Okay. Perfect. I like the way you described it. Keep writing JAQUINN1 at AOL.com. We'll see you next time.